Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Lesley Choyce, and this show today is dedicated to Budge Wilson. She's the author of 30 books. She's 80 years old this year, and we're interviewing her down here, invading her space at Northwest Cove, Nova Scotia. Hi, Budge.
Hi, Lesley.
Thanks for allowing us into your world.
Nice to have you here.
What do you know now as a writer that you didn't know when you were starting?
As a writer.
Yes.
Not as a person.
Well, I'd like to hear both.
Well, that would take too long. I would say that as a writer, I don't really know an awful lot more than I did when I started, because I started writing very intuitively anyway, because I had had no training as a writer, had never planned to be a writer, and I'm working in almost exactly the same way as I worked then.
Very interesting. Now, you came to writing rather later in life, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Why was that? Yeah.
Well, I'd been doing a whole lot of other things. I had worked a little bit as a teacher. I'd worked as a second-class commercial artist, and I worked over 20 years as a fitness instructor. I was happy doing all those things. Then I worked for a while, 7 years, as a photographer, and I started reaching the end of my 40s. When your eyes get kind of funny, you know, you've seen your old aunt read a book that, you know, from this distance, because she can't see things up close. And I was using a twin lens reflex where you have to focus looking down, and it's very important that you have that very sharp focus. I started taking bad pictures. So I knew I couldn't be a photographer anymore. So I thought, okay, what'll I do? So I thought, can you imagine the arrogance? I thought, okay, I'll be a writer. Because I'd always enjoyed it in school. I'd enjoyed it in university. I had no courses in writing, but you always have to write essays or compositions in school, that kind of thing. And so that's what I did.
Now, did you feel like you had some special motivation there because you had this message to get out to the world and that you would do it through your books?
No, certainly not at that point. No. I had told a lot of stories to my children before they would go to bed at night, ones that I would make up. And I remember thinking, okay, if I ever need these, they'll be in my head. Well, they weren't. But it meant I was used to thinking of stories for children. So I just thought of more stories for children of the same kind of and at the same level. And I suppose in that way it was different from the writing I did later, which often was for older children or for adults.
Was it easy? Did you find immediate acceptance, or did you have to go through the rejection?
Well, I could have stuffed a pillow with the amount of rejection slips I got. No, I started at 50, and I didn't get a book till I was 56. That's a long time.
Wow. Favorite authors who are inspiring you to go down this path?
No, I don't think so. There were certainly books when I was growing up that I liked, although I was not a heavy reader. I spent more time drawing or playing baseball in the vacant lot or doing that kind of thing. I was not a heavy reader, but I do remember certain books I liked, but I didn't, things like The Secret Garden and the Anne books and the Emily books, but I didn't have in mind being like them.
Yes.
At all.
You would be your own kind of writer. What about other, aside from authors, powerful influences? I mean, we all have to have something to write about, and you know, no matter how much we say fiction is fiction and our lives are separate, it's always somehow coming from our lives. What were some of those powerful influences that did lead you into the stories that you wrote?
Well, I'm not sure it led me into this kind of stories I wrote, but there were two main influences on me in terms of writing, and it probably made me a better writer, although I wasn't taught how to write stories or that kind of thing. One was a teacher in school whose name was Frida Pipe, and one was Lindsay Bennett at Dalhousie, Professor Lindsay Bennett, who was an English teacher. And both of them made me believe in my writing. The teacher, I often tell this in schools, two teachers, because it had such a huge effect on me. This teacher, Frida Pipe, after giving a composition, which was to be a story, read my story aloud, and she said to me afterwards, "I wish I could write stories as well as you can." Well, I nearly died, because this was a woman I really admired as a person and as a teacher, and for her to say that, I never forgot it. And I think that carried me through those 6 long years when I was getting rejections, because I believed her and didn't believe them.
It's a pretty darn difficult process, and you have to have a pretty tough shell, don't you, to get through that phase that you're talking about?
Thick skin. I would say it's one of the most important things to have, is a thick skin if you're going to be a writer.
A recent book of yours, a collection of short stories called Fractures, is about family relationships, and especially about problems in family relationships. Why do you find that a rich territory to write about?
Well, I'm very interested in suffering to begin with. You know, why we suffer and how different people react to it and so on. And I do think that a lot of those forms of suffering originate in families. I just feel that most families are, to a degree at least, dysfunctional. I have never yet seen a perfect family. Sometimes I think I do. And then you find there are cracks, hence the term fractures. And so I guess that's why I chose that.
What are some the good family problems to write about? I can see you sitting down. Oh boy, today I'm going to write about. And I know you don't do it this way. You know, you don't pick a subject. But if you were to sort of label some of those family problems,
well, they jump to your mind pretty quickly. You know, you can think of things like sibling rivalry, and then you can think of all the standard problems there are between fathers and sons, or mothers and daughters, because these people talk about that all the time. And problems with husbands and wives, and then problems with families when other factors enter the scene, like an accident or disabilities or a death or whatever. There's a whole kind of world of families. Yes. You could do it forever. That book, by the way, I dedicated to those 2 teachers.
Oh, nice.
Frida Pipe and Lindsay Bennett.
Oh, right. Yeah, so you make that connection. Now, is fiction, the kind of fiction you're talking about here, is this a good place for some nice, tidy resolutions to those complex problems?
Well, I don't think there are tidy resolutions to those problems, Lesley. I mean, sometimes you get some sort of resolution in a story, in one of my stories. Even if it's an ending where things don't end up well, at least something happens. You want something to happen. But I think, or hope, that what would happen is that members of families, and we're all members of families one way or another, would read them and feel they weren't alone. Mm-hmm. They would understand that other people had the same problems as they did, and maybe help them look at it a little differently, and maybe parents understand their kids better, particularly if they're, say, teenagers. Because I do know that one of the things I like best in the thing that I regard as the biggest compliment is if someone comes to me and says, "I found myself in your book." Well, I think there are lots of ways of finding yourself in books. And if they do that, it means that, when they do that, it's always as though, in their eyes, that's a good thing, that they found themselves. Yes. Right. And it's often someone who that I happen to know has suffered in some kind of way.
So we're back to the suffering. Well, the flip side of suffering is compassion. You must be a compassionate writer if you feel other people's pain.
Well, I hope so. That's all I can say about that. I do feel sorry for them.
Yes,
these people in my books.
For your characters, not necessarily real people. Well, real people and characters.
Oh,
both,
I feel
right?
sorry for real characters too, but I feel sorry for the people in my books.
All right. So what do you want your readers to come away from your books with? Do you want them to say, "Boy, that Budge Wilson, she's some good writer"?
Well, that would certainly be nice, but I think I want them coming away with that thing we've just been talking about, a feeling that they maybe understand people better, and that maybe that they're a little bit more merciful in their judgments. If there happen to be people in the books that are drunks or unkind for one reason or other, if you can get at the reasons why these things happen, you can have more compassion for them, if you can get at the reasons. I would just hope that they would understand, this is what I would like. I would like them to understand the human race better, and that they would understand themselves better. That's the simplest answer I can give you.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm down here in Northwest Cove today, speaking with Budge Wilson at her home overlooking the water, and we're going to take a short break and be back right after this.
This program is presented as a public service by Mount St. Vincent University.
Hi, we're back. I'm Lesley Choyce, and I'm down here at the home of Budge Wilson, Budge and Alan Wilson in Northwest Cove. And I'm speaking to Budge about many things. She's 80 years old, and there's so much life to be lived and to be discussed. Tell me about your personal connection to this place, to Nova Scotia, to the sea around us, to the culture and the land.
Well, I was born here. I don't mean I was born in this village, but I was born in Nova Scotia. I was born in Halifax, where you're always close to the sea because it's a peninsula. And very, very early on, I developed a real, I have to say, passion for the sea. In all its moods, it can be dead calm, or as they say, flat oil calm. It can be a raging storm, and we've been through a hurricane here. I can't say I loved that.
This very building that we're in was hit by Hurricane Juan. Your house and property were hit by Hurricane Juan.
Very, very badly.
What happened to the building we're sitting in?
Oh, well, it moved out 4 feet, down 1 foot. All the windows, the big windows, were smashed, and the sea rushed in the windows. And stuff was thrown all over the place. All our decks outside went. The boat launch went.
You said the dishes were still on the shelf after all of
yes,
that?
Yes, and I don't know whether you pick up that lamp in the picture, but the table it's standing on flew across the room and ended up in front of the door, probably keeping a lot of the stuff from falling out. But that lamp, and the top part is glass, emerged whole. So strange things happened. Yes. But my husband found salt water in cups that were 8 feet up. A lot of water in this place, a lot of damage, a lot of grief afterwards. And that's the word. It was grief. You know, Alan, my husband, spent 35 years building it up from almost nothing to what it was before the hurricane. And to see that all gone in one night was hard. Well, I mean, so many people went through that.
Well, you write about healing in your fiction, and as I look around today on this beautiful sunny day on a very calm ocean, it looks like everything has been fixed here. The fractures have healed.
It has.
Let's go back to the writing. Where is it that you write?
Well, I often write in the building we're in at the moment. I don't know whether you can see with your cameras the bed that is behind you. I've got a spinal condition. And I can't work at a table. I can't work at, well, for other reasons, I can't work at a computer. Well, that's kind of interesting why I can't. I type too quickly, and my fingers start going faster than my brain, and I start writing bad stuff. So I have to do everything by hand, and I work on that bed over there against the wall with usually a old record album thing that you put the records in.
Okay.
As a sort of a lap desk.
Yes, yeah.
And write by hand. But I work here before the season starts. Once the summer comes, then people start sort of just arriving. And so there's a good chance that you'll be interrupted. And Alan has built me a wonderful little cabin that's where I can't see anything or hear anything that's happening here. And I wish if there were time we could see that and maybe take a shot or two of it, because it's a great place, because it's very remote. When I was working in Peterborough, I was doing fitness classes at a convent, and they gave me a room for 12 years. Well, that was a terrific place. Now I find I don't have to be quite as quiet and remote. I wrote most of the last book I wrote when there was a lot of construction going on in a building right across the street, so I did it to the accompaniment of jackhammers and stuff like that, and I found that you could get through it.
And yeah, professional writers can train themselves
and
after a while too.
Sometimes there's a howling dog that can get to me, but I can get around it too now, I find, after a few minutes of refined torture, you know.
Yes, yes, that's where the discipline part comes in. So you write longhand.
Yes.
And then someone would transcribe what you've written. Do you have nice, legible handwriting? Did your teachers teach you to write properly?
No, that is a problem. You have to find someone who can do that. And I have found 3 different people over the course of time. I used to then type that manuscript in myself. I can't do that anymore. I can't sit up that long.
Well, but it is all about the words. As long as the words find their way to the readers, it doesn't matter what the method is. How do you know when you're in the process of writing if you've nailed a scene, if you really have it right?
Here's a really quick answer. I just have a feeling, and I trust it.
You know,
I can also have a feeling that it's wrong, and trust that.
Okay, and so then how do you fix it? That was my next question. If you've written something you know you did not get it right.
Okay.
It's very common.
One thing I'm doing with my first draft I write quickly. And I know I've got it wrong, we'll say. I don't stop. I go right on. Yes. Maybe I ring it with something or make a mark in the margin. I do not stop, because I find that stopping is fatal. You just have to go on as though it didn't happen. And if you're talking about, say, a whole story, and you're thinking, okay, this is no good, I don't throw it away. I keep it in a file, because I think maybe there's something in this story that will twig another idea later on, so I hang on to it. I'm thinking now, though, that I'm 80, I better do something a little more drastic. I should get rid of those things so that someone won't find them when I'm dead.
You don't want to leave your mistakes available for other people to
No, I don't. I don't.
That's interesting.
I remember, I'm very fond of Salinger as a writer, and it's always been a sad thing.
J.D. Salinger?
Yeah, a sad thing to me that he wrote so little, because he did, very little. And someone knew about my feeling about Salinger and found a few old stories in ancient, I think, Saturday Evening Posts, sent them to me. Well, what a shock, because they were bad. They were really bad. Well, I don't want that happening. I mean, no doubt there's stuff out there already that's bad, and I can't do anything about it. But I don't want to make it happen on purpose.
Well, we're all permitted to sort of develop as writers in somewhat of a public way, and people have to accept that what you've written at a certain age when you're younger is not necessarily your best work.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay if it's out there. It really is. Budge, what words come to mind that you'd use to describe yourself?
I would say very curious. I find that if I even meet someone on a train or an airplane or in a grocery store and we start talking, I find I want to know all about them. I want to know about their family. I want to know if they're happy or sad, if they've got kids, what they do with their life. I think I am basically a very nosy person.
And that's why you eavesdrop on those conversations.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do. And that's useful for dialogue.
For a writer. It's called research.
Yes.
So you're curious.
Yes, and I love a lot of people, really quite a lot of people. So I guess you'd say I was loving, and but I'm also very lazy.
Curious,
very lazy.
Loving, and lazy.
Yes.
Well, that's not a bad collection. Yeah, we'll forgive you for the laziness. If you could do a couple of things to improve the world, what would you do?
Two. You're giving me two things.
Well, you could do more than two. It's up to you.
Well, you're going to be upset, but one is I would do away with television.
Okay.
And
We've vanished.
I think for a lot of reasons that many people have mentioned. You know, there's too much sitting around, and there's too much violence, and there's you're being fed all the time. You're not putting anything into it. And I would also do away, this is even more amazing, is I would do away with computers. And then that would slow everything down. I find everything's going too quickly. Almost everyone you speak to is working harder than they want to work. They have to take their work home in the evening. They're working at a pace they don't want to work at. And I don't think that's good for people. And I'd like to see people go back to writing letters and having things just happen a little more slowly.
Yes.
What's the big rush?
I'm down here in Northwest Cove today, speaking with Budge Wilson at her home, overlooking the water, and we're going to take a short break and be back right after this.
If you'd like more information about this or any of the programs we produce at Mount St. Vincent University, call us. We welcome your comments.
Hi, and we're back in Northwest Cove with Budge Wilson. Budge, you were invited to do a very unusual thing, which was to write an Anne of Green Gables novel to take up where Lucy Maud Montgomery left off. What was that like, and what did you do?
Well, it wasn't really where she left off. It was before she began, because it's a prequel. And it took me a long, long time to decide I would do it. I was afraid to begin with, and I'm still a little uneasy about this, whether she would like this being done. I'm feeling okay about that now, but that was quite a difficult thing to figure out. I was also wanting to write in a different kind of way when I finished my last book. I wanted to do some poetry and some things that were more adult. But I was held by the puzzle of how Anne, in Anne of Green Gables, became so feisty and fun and articulate and strong-willed when she had had such a difficult upbringing in two difficult foster homes and an orphanage, which she describes as being the worst of all. And it was like a puzzle. It was like writing a detective story in a way to find out how that could happen. So I thought, yeah, I'd like to do that. So I did it.
And you did it. How old is Anne in your novel?
She is, well, I don't want to talk too much about the novel until it comes out, but I have said this in the media before, so I can say it, that I start before she's born. So I have to take her many steps before she gets to be 11 years old and steps off that train, you know.
And we'll all be dying to read that and find out your take on Anne of Green Gables. Thanks, Budge, for inviting us here to be with you and for being on the show.
It's fun to have you here, Lesley.
And thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time.